All right, this is AP Lit. We're doing John Donne's poem, Hymn to God the Father. You want to start with the puns, since that seems to be the one that that's given most people, at least most interesting. And that's just something. I'm glad it has. John Donne enjoyed that because it's something else to look for. It's another tool in your arsenal to find out. It's part of diction, and it is a literary device. Somebody want to give me at least one of the three puns? The third one is there are two that are obvious, I think, and then the third one maybe not so much. Anybody want to give me your understanding of any of the puns? Nobody feels confident with it. I know Courtney does. She's already told me.
Yeah, I do. Dunn, his last name is Dunn, so he's called the Dunns.
How many Dunns were there?
Okay, I counted there were 6 of them.
All right, that's...
3.
Am I wrong? Did I miss
this
one?
one.
Oh, no.
4, 5, 6.
You have to pay attention. Colleen, I heard
missed it.
Colleen say she circled something several times. I don't know if you made it, you were able to use that, but I like that thinking. You don't know what's important yet. You don't know what you can make of yet. You just got to circle what. Okay, this is repeated. Wow, and so that's.
There were some.
Yeah, good. He's clearly making a point with that. Yeah.
Is he kind of referring to the different versions of himself by the different sins that he committed?
Explain what you mean.
Well, he keeps saying done at different times, and each time he's referring to a different sin that made him who he was.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
progressed his relationship with the Father.
Yeah, each stanza deals with different sins or different stages of sin or whatever. You're right. Anybody have any other? You're going to kick yourself when you. I said you had to read the background. All right, let me ask you.
Oh, I just looked at it.
What?
He says, I have no more because his wife died. And her name last name is Moore.
Yes.
Oh.
Oh.
Sarah, I told you.
That's
Right.
You didn't say no.
I said
Oh,
no.
okay.
He has no because it's like, he has no more.
Now, what's sinful about marriage? Which is he was married to her, legitimately married to her. He was older, but that's not a sin. So what did he consider sinful about the marriage? And you had to read the introduction, the background. What's wrong with him marrying this girl? Because he says, you have not done to giving me my sins because I have more. And in other words, her. That's one of the things it means, because it has to mean two things, because that's what puns do. So what was his sin against her? Or maybe not against her, but involving her.
Her father was in the upper class, and I'm guessing he was in the lower class, so her father didn't want her marrying a lower class person.
Yeah, so he didn't, maybe he sinned against her, although it says they were happily married, but he really sinned against her father. Note the title of the poem, A Hymn to God the Father. He never mentions father again, does mention thy son, so you could almost argue the father is, I don't know if that's a pun, it's not really a pun, it has more than one meaning, which is sort of the same thing, but God the Father versus his father-in-law, maybe that would be considered a pun. Anybody else find there's at least one more that is pretty obvious? Yes.
I said sunshine.
Yes.
Yay.
Yeah. Thy sun shall shine. That's a pun. He's used that before. We did another poem where he used that one. I always also thought in the first line of the second stanza, wilt thou forgive that sin which I have won? W-O-N. I'm thinking of O-N-E. Like I have, will forgive that sin which I have won. I don't know. Sometimes you do make these things without thinking. That's possible too. Most of everything in a poem is there because the author thought carefully, but he might have even slipped something in that he wasn't aware of. All right, so I like the question too about number 4. What does each stanza say about his sin? The 3 stanzas, probably itself significant, being a Christian as he was. There's 3 stanzas. But what does he say about sin in the first stanza? And I thought somebody said something like this a little earlier. And he talks about what is said about sin in the first. Nobody has a clue? Well, let me draw your attention to the second line. Well, wilt thou forgive that sin where I've begun, which was my sin, though it were done before. So what is that referring to? Yeah.
Is he talking about the original sin?
That's always a possibility. There's always more to it than you expect. But what else could it, more literally, could it mean?
He's talking about how he sinned even though others have done it before him, he still needs forgiveness for it.
So his previous sins, will thou forgive my previous sins, and plus where I begun? I guess he's thinking about the marriage. But his previous sin, that particular sin, would you forgive me? Then he says, wilt thou forgive that sin through which I run and do still run, though still I do deplore. But which sin in his life is he talking about there? Not necessarily specifically, but what is he saying about his sin? He sinned in the past, and he's asking, will God forgive me of that? And then what other sins does he want him to forgive him of? Through which I run and do still run. Yeah.
Anything like in the present or in the future that he's going through?
Right now, he's still sinning. And notice it's all these are questions. That's where, again, your syntax comes in. It's poetry, but still you can talk about syntax. Why is he questioning that? Will thou forgive that sin? Will thou forgive this sin? That suggests doubt that maybe he doesn't think God can forgive that sin or this sin. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like when Abraham was sitting with God and looking over Sodom and Gomorrah and was saying, if you find 50 righteous people, will you spare it? And like, I'm sorry, I'm going to ask again, and reminded me of that.
Huh. And of course he found, God stopped him at 10, after 10. And because there were sinful people. I mean, there were only 3 righteous people there. But there's another sin mentioned in the first stanza. What is that? Done before? Done now? What would be the logical next step? Done in the future. When thou hast done, thou hast not done. When you forgiven those sins, you're still not finished, because I have more. Either more sins rather than the one, or future sins. I just wrote future sins, but it doesn't have to. It's certainly more than one sin. All right. And this, we haven't gotten to the next part yet, but when's the last time you even thought about sin? When's the last time you ever heard the word sin? Sin City. I mean, that's a joke, you know. But have you ever heard it in a movie? Have you ever heard the word sin in a movie? Have you ever heard it in a TV show? I mean, you simply fallen off the map. The word completely fallen off. If you were the devil, and you wanted to, his purpose is to bring every single person he can to hell with him. What would be one of the strategies you would want to use about how would you get as many people to go to hell with him as he could? What would be one of the strategies regarding sin that he would want to employ? Don't even mention sin. Don't even make it so that it doesn't even exist. He knows it does, because he knows God better than most people do. But if we don't talk about it, if we don't label anything as sin, if the whole concept is not here anymore, then all those people can go to hell with me. To me, it's a great strategy if you're Satan. But look at the second stanza. What does he say about sin in the second stanza? The 3 stages, past, present, future, but which sins is he talking about in the second one?
And that he's done to other people.
And even worse than doing to other people, what's even worse than sinning against somebody? Causing them, have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought about any of your actions that would lead other people into sin? You know what Jesus said about the babies? If you cause a child to sin, you you'd be better off never having been born. It's a millstone around your neck. That's how, causing others to sin. And think about that category about what people in the world are doing that. Sometimes we inadvertently, I can't imagine you or I ever purposely wanting somebody to sin. Might happen, but we could certainly do it inadvertently. What about your example? That could cause people to sin. Your good example might help lead them out of sin. But that's not it. That's not all, he says. Besides the sin I cause others to sin, what's the other in that second stanza? Well, thou forgive that sin which I did shun a year or two, but wallowed in a score. What sin is he talking about there? Yeah.
Is it the ones that he shunned other people for?
Maybe, or sin that he shunned. If you shun a sin, what would you? If you shun a person, what do you do? What do you do when you shun a person? You know what that word means? You ignore them. So if you kind of turn your back on a sin for a couple of years, but then you wallowed in that, what does it mean to wallow in something?
I think of pigs.
What?
I think of pigs while.
Yeah. So what is that? They get completely immersed in it, and they enjoy it. They roll over in it, and so forth. Said, will you forgive the sin which I did shun a couple of years, or one, but for 20 years I sinned in it? Like the number of times or the amount of times I've sinned, does that disqualify me from? I was serious for a couple of years, and that kind of discouraging. You had this terrible habit, you got rid of it for a couple of years, you thought you were good to go, and bam, here it's back. Ah, gosh, I thought I was done with that. No pun intended. But he's not finished. What does he say about sin at the end? There's a specific fear, a specific sin that he has at the end. What is that? Think about it. This is key. If you're on your own, if they give you a John Donne poem, you got to work through this. So what is it? I have a sin of fear. That's it right there. What does that mean? Is fear a sin? You ever thought of that? We just read the red badge of courage. Is it a sin to run from battle? Is it a sin to be afraid and fight, but you're still afraid? So what's sinful about fighting and being afraid? Is fear a sin? I have a fear of sin that when I have spun my last thread, I shall perish on the shore. So what's that sin? What is that fear? What does he fear, which he calls a sin? Well, he perishes on the shore. But swear by thyself that at my death thy sun shall shine as he shines now, and therefore. So, in the context, what does that sin have to be? The fear, the sin of fear that he has. Yeah.
I guess in fearing that the sun will be inconsistent and not shine at his death, I guess
Meaning
he's doubting God.
who?
Or like Jesus.
Yeah. What? That's the ultimate sin and the ultimate fear. What if I go to hell anyway? What if at that moment I find out that I've gone to hell and I don't see Jesus? Remember the poem, I saw a fly buzz when I died? Did we do that one? Oh gosh, we got to do that one. That's Dickinson, Emily Dickinson. I'll tell you what, she expects to see Jesus, but instead she sees a fly. And she's a little bit disillusioned. There's another, it's a short story. I'm trying to remember who wrote it. I can't even remember the title. Granny Weatherall, that's the character. Same thing happened. Yeah, it's a story about her dying, and when she dies, nobody's there. Where's the king? Where's nobody? And if that scares you, I don't think that's a sin. I think that's God speaking in you don't want that to happen to you. But why would, if you know Jesus, why would it be a sin to fear that Jesus wouldn't be there when you die? Why would that be he calls it a sin. Yeah.
Or you're doubting that he is who he says
Yeah. I mean, again, my wife, think about your closest person in your life. If I doubt her, if I doubt her faithfulness, if I doubt, I don't think she's going to be there for me. That what an insult that would be. What do you think of me? That you wouldn't think I would be here. And think about Jesus. You don't think he's going to show up like he said he was? And notice at the end he says, and having done that, thou hast done. I fear no more. I think we've answered these, but just go back to the, I think we've answered them. But just go back to the whole point. You don't have to answer this, but when's the last I think the poem raises for me, when's the last time I thought about sin? Is that probably not for you? But as you get older and you stay in the faith, it becomes bigger and bigger. You realize, man, I don't like it. It's possible not to like your sin and still love yourself. I think people would worry you. That would give you a terrible self-image if you're saying, I hate that I did that. You're a good person. Don't hate yourself. I don't hate myself. I hate that I did it. I like myself. I love myself. That's natural. But I hate it when I do that. What a wonderful feeling that is. Remember Henry Fleming? At the very last page, remember what he says? He could think of that tattered soldier, but he felt like, and he hated the way he treated him, and that made him feel really good. That made him feel clean, that he hated the bad things in himself. By the way, and I don't know that we have time, we don't have time today. Did you know there's a sequel to The Red Badge of Courage? And it's in your book, and it's a short story, and I'd love to read it together if I can remember. It's called The Veteran, and it's a sequel years later when Henry Fleming is an adult. So it's really an interesting story. Would you do me a favor? I think this is really helpful. Not me a favor, do you a favor. Would you write a statement on here that summarizes or articulates the meaning of this poem? If you could pull together the things that we've talked about. And remember that the puns are his way of expressing his meaning. That's one of his major devices, but not the only one. So write down what you would say the meaning of this poem, pulling all those things together. Anybody wanna read? We just have a few minutes. Anybody, wanna read? I've got a couple of people in mind I'd like to ask, but any volunteers? So, Willow, would you read yours?
I said that there is no need to fear sin, no matter how many times you do it. Trust in the Lord is the most important thing through every stage of life and through every sin, past, present, future, and those done to others.
Good. I would add that what was his particular sin that kind of ran through this whole thing? It was his sin against the father, right? He didn't really sin against her. He sinned against the father-in-law because he eloped and he stole her away. And I think that probably needs to be, make sure when you talk about what the poem means, it also is specific to the context of the poem. What did you say, Avery?
I said that John Donne is asking forgiveness for all forms of his sins from both God, but also his wife's father because he loved her and does not want her, because he wanted permission from his father.
Yeah, and don't forget, and very good, both of them, don't forget the doubt. You know, he has doubt, because he's questioning, will you forgive this, will you forgive this, will you forgive this? So that adds something to it. How about Clayton, what did you say?
I said that basically reflecting on and confessing when sin and acknowledging the wrong is helps to better oneself and strengthens them to have faith that Jesus will save them.
Yeah, and again, the doubt that he expresses and all that, he's not all that sure at the first two stanzas, but he becomes more sure at the end. Sarah, what'd you say?
This poem is about the sins of John Donne. He begins by asking the Father to forgive him of his past, present, and future sins. Then the sins he caused others to commit, along with the sins he once swore off but proceeded to become immersed in. And finally, his fear that Jesus will be inconsistent and not be present in his death.
Yeah, and it just struck me again, he asked the Father to forgive him. That has two meanings, right? What are the two meanings?
Like God and the Father. is-
Yeah, so you hurt somebody and you ask God to forgive you, you're good to go, right? Not yet. What you still gotta do? You've hurt somebody and you ask God to forgive you, but what have you not done?
Has been forgiven.
Yeah, gone to the person and made it right. There's no way you can no way you can do this just with God. He's you gotta go face him, tell him, you gotta do that. How about McKinley? We'll do the last one, unless anybody else has.
I said the meaning of this poem is that John Donne realizes that he constantly needs forgiveness for all of his sins that he's committed, and he needs to have his faith placed in Jesus, and that he will do what he says he will do.
And imagine this paper that you would write after you wrote that. The paper would look at the ways that John Donne did that, what you just said. How did he do it? He used puns. What else did he do? How would you describe the devices that he used to articulate, express those ideas? We mentioned the pun, but what else? What did we look at? Look at the question. The question number 4, the structure. The way he's organized, just like we did with the curator. There's a particular organization of that, or like not the poison tree, but the solitary reaper, which we also did yesterday. Anyway, the chronological, so you have to consider all those things, plus I didn't, I guess you could say there's symbols here. He always uses those. So, again, for tomorrow, we're done. For tomorrow, please, the questions might help you. The questions I ask are there. I'll use those questions. Now, I would look over the questions if you've read it, and that should help.